Merci beaucoup, camarades.
My friends, let me tell you, when somebody has got a gun on his waist, na ingine aweke kwa meza, you cannot argue with that person. A civilian government elected by the people is better than any military government.
Why is President William Ruto's government haunted by Ibrahim Traoré? There is something about the name Ibrahim Traoré that stirs two widely different emotions on the African continent. In parts of West Africa, his name is chanted like an anthem. To Pan-Africanists, he is a fearless young captain who dared to defy the West, a liberator who reclaimed Burkina Faso's dignity from imperialist claws. But in Kenya, particularly in the corridors of William Ruto's State House, Traore's name doesn't inspire applause. It triggers unease.
It is a military government. It is not a civilian government. A civilian government mtapata nafasi 2027 to make a decision in a civilian government.
For President Ruto and his allies, Traore isn't the romanticized revolutionary social media memes paint him to be. To them, he is the example of military autocracy, a warning of why soldiers should never trade their barracks for presidential palaces.
Unajua watu wengine wanafikiri ati
some people think that the leaders they see online, those wearing masks, carrying guns on their hips, that's what leadership is.
ati wanafikiri ati huo ndio uongozi.
My friends, let me tell you, when someone has a gun on their waist and another one on the table, you cannot argue with such a person. That's why I am warning you. Don't be fooled into thinking military governments, those that come to power through coups rather than ballots, are a solution. A civilian government elected by the people, even with all its flaws, is far better than any military regime, any day.
A civilian government is better any day.
Don't be misled as Kenyans. You know artificial intelligence? They take Ibrahim Traoré's videos and add artificial voices, making it sound like he's speaking perfect English. But they don't speak English, they speak French. Yet conveniently, they are using AI to deceive African youths that his leadership is flawless. There is no perfect leadership in him. That's a military government. It is and will remain a military government.
Artificial voice, the artificial intelligence, ati huyo mtu anaongeza Kiingereza kisanifu nini. My friend, it's artificial intelligence. Yeye hazungumzi, they don't converse in English, they converse in French. But conveniently, wanamweka kwamba anatoa story in very fluent English. It is artificial intelligence kuhadaa vijana wetu wafikiri kwamba hapo ndio kuna uongozi. Hakuna uongozi pale. Hiyo ni military government. It is a military government. It is not a civilian government. A civilian government mtapata nafasi 2027 to make a decision in a civilian government.
The Kenyan government has gone out of its way to warn citizens against catching Burkina Faso fever, including sketching nightmare scenarios of a military takeover in the country. According to Silvana Sosoro, a Kenyan Traore would mean chaos, ruin, and a one-way ticket to dictatorship.
Kukiwa kubaya hapa hakuna nchi nyingine. Leo hii tukiandamana tunaenda kutoa rais kwenye State House.
Let's not allow chaos in this country. If things go bad here in Kenya, there is no other country we can run to. Today you're talking about storming State House to remove the president. Do you even understand what that means? If you remove a president through unlawful means, the military takes over leadership. And when the military takes over, these police officers you see around, they all become ordinary citizens. They are sent home, and if they had guns, they go home with them. Prisoners in jail are released. And if any of them had grudges with you, they come for you to settle scores. The country descends into chaos and becomes ungovernable, like other nations that have collapsed. That's why I keep telling you. You don't know the value of peace until it's gone.
But why is Ruto's administration spending so much political capital demonizing a 36-year-old captain governing 5,000 kilometers away? Why does Traore's shadow loom so large over Nairobi's political conversations? You see, since the June 25th protests of 2024, whispers of a possible military takeover have grown louder in Kenya. Whispers that had been dormant since the failed 1982 coup against President Daniel Arap Moi. At this time, it isn't just idle talk. From church pulpits to street corners, even within the hallowed chambers of parliament, some Kenyans are asking dangerous questions. Could a coup restore Kenya's dignity? Should the nation consider going the Burkina Faso way?
I think, when we're talking about like a military taking over a country, what happens when a military takes over? One thing that I love about, I would say, democracy, and it's not really the best style of leadership or style of governance, but I would say it's the best that we have, or the best that a country can have. So a country coming in, you're looking at one thing about power, one thing that you need to ask yourself about power is that how is it going to pass over to the next person, right? Continuity is a very big issue. If you look at the case of even Ibrahim Traoré himself, what happens in the event that he perhaps maybe is killed or anything happens to him? Has he laid down, the necessary, policies or anything to ensure that once he's not there, someone else will take over? And for a country like Kenya, we have struggled. We have gone through, independence. We have fought. We have gone through the end of one party system, and all these things. It has been, politicians, civil society, pushing for that.
Yeah.
Of course, in terms of the military, we had that attempted coup in 1982, which of course changed how President Moi was dealing with. Basically with politics in the country. Yeah. And the reason why, to go back to your question, the reason why I feel that they are really talking so strongly about it is because they don't know perhaps how the current situation is going to play out. Deep inside, I would say that they're scared. They're really scared. But so I guess the question you're asking is whether a military takeover would be something that's
good for Kenya.
Beneficial. Would be something that will be good for Kenya. Yeah. I think it depends. It depends on so many things. And one thing that I would say it depends on is the personality of that person who perhaps takes over. If you look at Ibrahim Traoré, for example, in Burkina Faso, he's someone who's from what we see is that he looks like someone who's really he was tired with what was going on in the country, corruption. With the short time that he's been there, you've seen development projects, building of roads, and that is very heavily dependent on the person that he is, right? Yeah. When you're talking about a coup, is looking at the person who's coming in. Is he going to be of the same temperament or ilk as Ibrahim Traoré, or will he or she be a power hungry person? So it's heavily dependent on the person and what his motives or her motives are, and how he will deal with the governance structures that are there. For example, Ibrahim Traoré has said that it's going to be a transition period for 5 years, and we are going to see perhaps an election that will happen. If you look at the case of Sudan, for example, when al-Bashir was ousted, when he was ousted from power, and then you see that currently how the RSF and the army there are fighting. You see, that is a situation that came from a coup. Those two generals, they for a while they allowed for there to be civilian administration, head of government, and then after a while, you can see that both of them are like vying for for power and vying for presidency. So when it comes to a coup, it's heavily dependent on the person that's there, and also how the international community would react to such a thing, because once there's a coup and let's say an army person takes over, sanctions would be the next thing. A country will be heavily sanctioned, and then if you are going to say that we are going into this coup so that we can provide, or we can make development, we can make the country better, and then there's sanctions that are placed on your country, how are you going to be able to do that? So it becomes quite difficult. So in my own personal opinion, I don't think a coup would be the best way to go. But again, the reason why these conversations are happening is because the people are so tired, and something needs to change when you're talking about the politics of the country and how the country is governed. Something will need to change.
Mm-hmm. And talking about a coup, there have been these stories doing rounds that if a military takes over, they would suspend the constitution for quite some time, and they would render all the police and render them jobless and turn them to be civilians, and it will be hell on earth for Kenyans. Is that true? Is that true?
Yeah, because yes, for you, when you're taking over power as a military man through a coup, you have to suspend the constitution, because according to the constitution of the country, someone who is a head of state needs to get to that position through a process, which is an election. So when you're doing that, you have to suspend parliament, for instance, because parliament is the one that is charged with making the laws of the land. You have to suspend the judiciary, because the judiciary is the one that adjudicates and settles matters that legal matters. So you have to do that, because if you're a coup, if you're the leader of the country right now, you have to take over power of everything. You talk about the three arms of government. I know the executive, the judiciary, and
the executive.
What's the third one?
Executive. The
executive, judiciary, and the legislature, that is parliament now. And so you take over power of everything. So you will render the parliamentarians obsolete. And then when it comes to now those who will be handling the security matters of the country, now that one is placed under your loyalists. So if you're an army person, of course, mostly when you're talking about coups, it's not like, for instance, the whole army. It's a certain group of people that takes power, and then according to who they are, then according to how they've mobilized, according to how they've organized themselves, now you will see now this other, the whole army will choose to follow them. So you would see now positions are given, like ministers, for example, are given to certain members of the army. So, and then the police, for example, in most of these African countries, the police act at the behest of the executive, which is a very sad reality that we're in. So when you want to take over, you don't want to create a situation where the person that you're taking power from would have any sort of way of getting back their power. So that means any person that's loyal to them, they're either jailed or killed. That is what happens. And it's a funny thing when you're talking about these things. We want to, because of as I said, because of how frustrated people are. That's why maybe you can entertain that thought of maybe what if the military comes in. But that would be a very, very sad reality. That would be the day. If I don't think it will ever happen in this country, but if it were to happen, I would say that it would be one of the worst things ever.
So, bottom line, if there would be a military takeover in the country, things would not be the same again for Kenyans and other civilians, right?
Things would be terrible. Again, okay, there's that element I've said. They should get a good guy, a good guy that says, I'm going to deal with corruption. I'm going to, ensure that, corruption is dealt with. we're going to build our roads, we're going to do that. How will you do that? Again, that's the country, because right now, the sad reality in Kenya is that we are heavily indebted. We depend heavily on loans from the IMF for our economy to even function. We depend heavily on the Western countries for us to do anything, for trade and everything, and all that. So it would be sad, and then there would be lawlessness. That is one thing, because in such a situation, everyone would feel that it would be like the militias would come up, in such a situation, because itakuwa kila mtu anajitafutia because I feel like there's a gap here that I can exploit, because of the law and order that's there. Sometimes people are afraid to do certain things. But if you look at what's happening in Sudan, for example, right now, mass killings, it's a very, very sad situation. And then how will you transition from that? Because ultimately, I would think that civilian rule or civilian administration or governance should be the way to go. The military should help protect the country. They should not be involved in the politics.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's such a deep discussion, and tukimalizia pia kuna hii swali ningetaka kujua. And do you suspect that recently military changes have been happening in the country? There have been reports out here that the military changes are being influenced by the political climate in Kenya, and maybe perhaps the president is even scared of somebody being close as a military head, and they are not aligned with his ideologies.
I would say anyone who becomes like chief of defense forces, in some way, it's the president who, of course, makes that appointment on the advice of this National Security Council. But even if you go back to the times of Uhuru Kenyatta, Mwai Kibaki and all that, the people that they've chosen to be heads of this, especially the top job, has to be someone that they're very comfortable with. Mm-hmm. So you cannot really separate that from that choice, because as the president, he needs to feel that he will be safe, in the appointments that he's making. So it's no surprise that people say, of course, Keter now he was made the army commander. And they're saying that some time down the line he's likely to maybe to be the CDF, or maybe the guy who's just left the immediate former army commander. Perhaps he will be the next chief of defense forces. So the president has to be very very comfortable in that decision that he's making. And also politics does come into play, even in other promotions that have been made. If you look at the promotions that are made right from the positions of lieutenant general, major generals, all of that, I would say that there is some element of politics, because you cannot separate politics completely from the military service. But one last thing that I want to say is that our Kenyan military is one of the most disciplined. It's one of the most well-trained, one of the in Africa well-trained army, disciplined forces, and let's not be afraid that anything of that sort would happen here. We have one of the best militaries. Yes.
Asante. Maybe you can remind our audience what your names are and exactly what you do.
Well, I'm Dennis Okemo. I'm a security analyst, security, politics, and economy. That's my forte, and I'm a consultant working with various projects that are working in peace building, especially in the northeast region of the country.